Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for this LinkedIn Live brought to you by the Evolution Exchange USA. And we are discussing today how to prepare for a data science interview. Now, we're doing things a bit different this go around. So we're talking about a hiring manager's perspective as well as a candidate's perspective. And I'm very fortunate to be joined today with She. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Donnie. Hi, everyone. I'm Palazzolo. I've been in the data science field for 10 years now. Undergrads, I was doing veterinary medicine. So I was practicing as a vet for a year and then decided to change my major to epidemiology, where I took a lot of courses in statistics and learned programming language such as SAS and R and transitioned into data science. And back then it was statistician, not such a cool name as data scientist as today. So I'm very happy to be here today and share some of my opinions with you all.
Great, great. So we're going to kick things off with the hiring manager perspective. And I think a good starting question would be, when you're looking at CV, do you come up with custom questions based off of the candidate's profile?
I will if I see the candidates have some interesting experiences or they share some of the interesting projects they have done. I will have ad hoc questions that will make me want to dive deeper into their experiences to learn more about them as a person and then dive deeper into their professional experiences.
Oh, very nice. And what kind of experience do you feel that a candidate should share during an interview? How, I would say, technical should they go?
Great question. I think you, as candidates, you will get a lot of questions of, can you walk me through one of your projects that you feel the most proud of and from end to end? So that I feel like will be a great opportunity for you to walk through one or two projects that you feel very, very proud, have high impacts from end to end, especially dive deeper as much as you can and as time allows. And if you want, you can stay at a high level and then allow the interviewer to ask you more questions and to have a deep dive into specific aspects of the project. Like I have done things like I will ask questions if they don't touch a lot on certain aspects. I will go back and ask, can you tell me more about how you go about doing feature engineering and how you monitor the post-deployment lifecycle of a machine learning model, things like that.
Just to be specific.
Yes.
Now, do you ask any brain teasers or anything like that? Any icebreakers?
Icebreakers, yes, but not so much brain teaser. I would just ask them about more, want to learn more about them as a person on top of their professional experiences. Just want to make that conversation more interactive and natural. I don't want to make it too formal of an interview. So I think sometimes I'll ask about their culture and then things they like to do outside of work.
Get them comfortable.
Yes.
Absolutely. And when it comes to, let's say you've got a CV in front of your hand, what are you looking for in that, resume, like that would stand out to you? Or is there anything that you would say that advice you could give for candidates when they're sharing their CVs over?
Great question. I think number one is really depends on the job that you're looking for or I am hiring for. If it's a more senior role and I have specific preference or requirements on specific areas such as ML ops, then I will look for in a resume, do they have any ML ops related experiences and how many years of experiences they had? And the other thing that I always look for in people's resume is that the impacts of their projects, not only to put in action words, this is what I have done, but I also wanted to see people showcasing the impacts of their projects because ultimately the solution that we're building, regardless if it's in data science or other industry, we wanted to show that our solution had an impact on people's life, on the products, on the business.
Or that it's also gone into production. There's a lot of
Yes.
analysis, ad hoc projects that people do, and the ones that actually, get implemented, I think carry a lot of weight. And highlighting, of course, the business impact, whether it's a numerical value or, it improved processes by X percentage, is always something good to highlight because that's exactly what companies are looking for. Now, on the academic side of things, Do you think candidates should add additional details on, some key projects that they've completed, especially if they've done advanced degrees?
Good question. I think as the senior you go, the educational piece to me it became less important as compared to your actual professional experiences. So I have seen for myself, for example, previously I would just list what degree that I've got, what major I was in, and then the year, and that was it. I didn't list any additional projects that I have done. But if you just fresh out of school, I think it would be helpful for you to list the projects that you have worked on during your time in school, so that help the employer looking when they're looking at your profile to understand more about your technical skills and what kind of projects that you have worked on before.
Absolutely. And when it comes to those projects, I've done recruitment all over the world. In APAC, came from Singapore, Malaysia. Um, I've noticed in America that CVs are much shorter and sweeter. There's not many bullet points. There's not much detail when it goes into the specific projects that, candidates have done, especially from a professional standpoint. How do you feel about that? Do you like seeing details about those specific projects, tech stack, and ultimately what they've done?
Yes, that's a great question. I feel like that's up for debate. A lot of people have different opinions. When I'm looking at candidate's CV, I don't really pay attention to how many pages there are, as long as it's not 10 pages or an essay that I need to read through. I think the key is really highlights 3 to 5 bullet points of your achievement, including some of the key responsibility that you had throughout your career, and some of showcase your impact and your skill sets. I think to me, that's a key that I will be looking for. Not really thinking too much about, wow, this person has 3 pages. Disregard, throw it away. So yeah, that's how I perceive the CV.
Great. Now, from a hiring manager's perspective, and shortlisting CVs, is there anything else that pops into your mind that you would like to add at this point?
I think really depends on the role, as I mentioned before too. It's that some candidates that get shortlisted will be the people who have really relevant experiences, or even if they're not in the same industry. I think that's okay too, but I really emphasizing on looking at the skill sets this candidate can bring and the potential this candidates can also help bring the value to the table. Those are the things that I would be looking for. And I think one thing that I also find helpful is that if they also attach their GitHub repo link, that will also give me another opportunity to look into the other side of their technical skill, how they go about solving a problem, creating a solution for a problem from end to end. I think that will be also a great highlight that candidates can add to their resume.
Great, great. I really appreciate that. I didn't think of anything as far as GitHub or other different sources where candidates are sharing their information with the overall community. Now, before we jump into, I guess, the specifics about a data science interview and the different kinds of interviews, I did want to discuss some generic best practices, regardless of the kinds of roles that you are going for, that I've seen throughout my career. Now, a lot of candidates that I've spoken to, potentially the shortlist happened maybe 3 or 4 weeks after they initially saw the JD and said, yes, Donnie, send me for this role. So it is always good to go over the JD, relook at the company's website if you haven't done so already, study their competitors. Knowing what the market is like is very impressive, even if you're not necessarily familiar. In data science as a whole, it's all about analysis. It is all about finding commonalities and showing that you are that inquisitive person, and understanding this particular new domain or a domain you already know could be quite beneficial. And look at the values, look at the company culture, as well as find out any recent achievements. We live in a world of LinkedIn. We're on there right now. Everyone is posting what their company is up to, recent events, articles. So it is very beneficial to look at this information and then bring it up during that session itself. Now, as well as, looking at the company, it's good to look at your own CV. We are always, retyping it, re-putting it together, tailoring it to specific jobs and companies. So it is good to look at that version that you shared with the individual company, because the hiring manager, that's what you're going to go off of. This is your only reference point before this person actually meets you face to face, regardless of the kind of interview it is. And also do some research on your interviewer, see where they went to school, see if there's any commonalities as far as LinkedIn connections, groups that you're involved in, or particular areas of interest that they're passionate about. Like she's comes from a veterinary background, loves animals, and it's important to know that before speaking with you, and maybe mentioning that you have a pet, or along those lines that you love animals, or what you are doing on the personal aspect as well. And then I would say be ready to ask questions about the company and the job description. Today job descriptions are all encompassing. They want everything, including the kitchen sink. So it is good to understand maybe potential areas that you're not as familiar with, and being completely upfront with that. In my line of work, most job descriptions are the candidates most of the time do not exist 100%. So you do want to find which are the most important bits, or the most important bits that you bring to the table, and being able to highlight those appropriately. Now, the last little bits for me is now there's 3 different types of interviews. We're so used to VCs these days. Everything is during video conference. Phone interviews are quite common as well. We don't do in person as much as we would like in some instances. So there's a few best practices on those real quick, and then we'll jump back into data science. So for the phone, make sure you have a good connection wherever you are. Make sure that you have good line and service. Find a quiet place, because background noise can distract the interviewee and the interviewer from what they're trying to say. As well as make sure your phone is charged. Last thing you want to tell an interviewer is that my phone's about to die, or have the line cut out unexpectedly because you weren't paying attention. You want to come across as professional as possible. So this is your opportunity to put your best foot forward. Same goes for video. Good internet connection. Make sure you're in a quiet place. Make sure you install all the necessary, applications that you need for that particular session, and check your camera and microphone to make sure they're working. Now, last, what we don't really see so much anymore is in-person interviews. Know where you're going and the appropriate time to get there. And typically 5 to 10 minutes is the ideal time for showing up for an in-person interview early. And then body language is very important. Eye contact, and make sure that you're staying engaged and prepared to ask questions. Now, we talk about the fun bits. Now, for data science, there's a wide variety of styles and types of interviews. And she has graciously allowed us to some insights into what she thinks is important in these particular different interviews, as well as what she's come across in her career. Now, I'll turn it over to you to discuss these types of interviews.
Yeah, thanks, Donnie. And before I go into the details of different type of interviews, I want to also tie back to your best practices for interview.
Absolutely.
I think the other one also important is the storytelling. Be prepared to share some of your highlights of the projects that you have done before with your interviewers. There are lots of strategies out there. You probably have heard STAR, SMART, things like that. One of the principles that I rely on is what I call a 3W: the why, what, and wow. So using that as a framework to help you tell your story better. The why, tell more about the context of this project, that situation. And then the what is really highlights on what you have done on the projects. And then the wow is really showcasing the impacts that your solution, because of your work, had the impacts on the business. So is an easy framework that our candidates, everyone can follow in their interviewing process, because storytelling is important in every aspect of our life. So going back to different type of interviews, the very common one is live coding. So in live coding, there are lots of different platforms. Very common ones includes CoderPads or Colab by Google. And it's really depending on what type of live coding it entails. I have seen a variety of software engineering oriented live coding session. like questions you may seen on HackerRank or LeetCode, which doesn't really necessarily apply to data science, but I have seen companies using those type of questions to screen data scientists. And that is also a different topic that is up for debate. Is it really an efficient way for us to screen for the technical skills in the data scientists using software engineering questions? And then the other type in live coding, which is what I was doing before for candidates, is live coding session using Colab. It's really wanted to understand the candidate's technical skills when applying to the work that this person will actually be doing. So one example is that I would ask the candidate to do a live coding on building a model from end to end while explaining the rationale behind every single step. Why do you use this to do manipulating your data, to do feature engineering, and then why do you choose a certain type of metrics? So those are the things that I really wanted to see how candidates like to showcase their skill sets. And especially if you do encounter this type of scenario, really look into the company's products, what kind of data they're working with. Is it structured, unstructured? If it's structured, is it time series data? Because there's a lot of whole not a different of techniques that you can apply to work with time series data. So those things are important to look out for while you're preparing for your live coding interview. I don't know, Donnie, if you want to add anything.
Well, I've never taken a coding, live coding assessment, but I would say that was very spot on, especially doing the research side to understand more about what the company is, what data they're using, where their sources from. It'll give you a good baseline because, as we've alluded to, they want everything under the sun. So being able to narrow your focus down a bit can be very beneficial in making sure that you do prepare yourself accordingly for that portion of the assessment.
Exactly. Thank you, Donnie. And similar to live coding, the other one, a common one, will be take-home assessment. There's also a debate between which one is more good use of candidates' time. Is it live coding or take-home assessment? So for take-home assessment, usually for data scientists, you will be given either a Jupyter Notebook or the Colab or in that some kind of fashion. And given your data sets and the sets of problems that you are asked to answer, and then how are they going to assess your take-home assessment? There are a couple of ways I have seen companies having someone review the take-home assessment and then to make a determination based on what they have seen, whether or not you will be moving forward to the next step. And the other one I have also seen is that you will be asked to do a presentation based on your take-home assessment. What are your findings and why did you do what you did, to a panel of different interviewers to present your findings and share. You may be asked, so what are your recommendations for this problem? So those are the very common ones when it comes to take-home assignments.
And all goes back to storytelling.
Exactly. Especially when you're doing a presentation, make sure that you understand who your audience is and are they technical or is it a blend of technical and business? So making sure that you craft the message to the point that is, these are the key takeaways and this is what I have done. And making sure that you also have an appendix that if you do need to go do a deep dive on a certain technical piece, then you will also have that information available for you to showcase during the interview process. And some other common ones, probably interview questions or topics circles around statistics because data science is based on math and statistics. So making sure that you brush up your statistics knowledge specifically on probability, what do they mean? What are some of the distributions that you commonly see? And how do you do hypothesis testing, A/B testing, and experimental design? Those are really key concepts that data scientists would use day to day to help them make decisions and designing experiments. So that is also another area that you will encounter in data science interviews. And the other one is more on
machine learning. Ask you a question on that one. Is that right,
yes.
What are some examples of the kinds of questions that maybe you've encountered in your interviewing times that have highlighted statistics or the math side of data science?
Good question. I think a lot of that I have encountered throughout my career would be focusing on experimental design and A/B testing because it's very relevant, especially in the decision science side of things. When you're creating a new feature or new design on the website and you want to making sure is this new design really driving more traffic to my website? And you will be asked, how do I design an experiment to make an effective comparison between the old design and the new design? So you will be asked, how do you calculate the sample size? And how do you assign to which one goes to the original design versus the new design? And what are the metrics that you will be using to evaluate the impacts of or compare the performance between those designs? So those are really common questions that you should be preparing for to answer regarding statistics.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the question. And the other common topic is around machine learning. So machine learning, there's many, you can go as wide, as deep as the interviewers want. So be prepared to get familiar with some of the very commonly used models, such as random forest, XGBoost, decision tree. You will be asked things like, what's the difference between those variety of models, and how do you detect overfitting or prevent overfitting, things like that. So making sure that you know the ins and outs of those commonly used machine learning models. And some other questions that I often ask candidates is that what considerations do you have when it comes to deployment? You have done your experiment, you find your winners or winner model that give you very good performance, and how to decide which one goes into production. And some other very common questions also includes, how do you figure out which metrics to use to evaluate your model performance? Because that also ties back to working with your business stakeholder to understand what is important to the problems that you're trying to solve, and then also taking into consideration of what consequences would that mean if we made a bad prediction. So those are the factors that you should be thinking of, and you will be asked about that too when it comes to machine learning. Donnie, do you have any questions?
Nothing on machine learning. I do not.
So similar to machine learning, if you're applying for a machine learning engineer or ML ops related role, you will be also doing an interview process called system design. So it's very specific when it comes to how do you design the ML infrastructure, because a lot of times companies are very excited about, oh, we're all about machine learning model, but only a few of them actually goes into production. So when it comes to production, how do we making sure that, how do we know the model is working? What do we need to do to monitor for the performance and monitor for changes? So system design will be, you will be tasked on understanding your knowledge in designing this whole system, from data ingestion all the way to retraining the model and creating a feedback loop. So you are taking care of the post-deployment machine learning lifecycle. And I have also seen people ask, like, how do you calculate the GPU size based on your data set size, and how to design how big your Kubernetes cluster nodes to be? So there's a lot of different topics that one will be asked during system design interviews. So that will be a lot of researches out there and resources out there for you to leverage to prepare for the system design interview. I think system design interview will probably be very similar to those of if you were to interview for a DevOps engineer. Those are kind of similar questions that you will encounter.
Great. And then last but not least?
Last but not least, did I miss one? Is it data visualization?
Data cleaning?
Data cleaning, yes. Data cleaning, I think you would encounter that more, especially during your live coding. If the live coding was building a model or building a solution of some sort, is really want to understand how do you detect missing value, outliers, and duplication, and how do you handle missing values? That's also a very key questions a lot of interviewers will ask to understand, do you always replace that with zero, or what is your process, your approach going about replacing missing values? Sometimes you would work with your SMEs or your business stakeholders to understand where do those missing values came from, and so that will give you more insights into how you should handle them. And the other one is it's a very hot topic right now when it comes to AI and ML, is how do you detect bias and gaps in your data, and how do you making sure that the predictions that we're generating is representative of the problems that we're solving, especially when it comes to creating a risk scoring model or a model that's related to insurance, a lot of areas that has to do with our day-to-day life. Those are the things that I would prepare for prior to a data science interview.
Mm. Perfect. Now, I do have a question in regards to, we've spoken about 6 different kinds of interviews that a data scientist could potentially encounter during the interview process. Now, what kind of resources do you use to prepare for these specific interviews? Are there any kind of websites or, I guess, different modes of, study or upskilling that you practice?
That's a good question. So let's go back. Live coding, if it's HackerRank style, that HackerRank, go to HackerRank or Lead Code. There's a lots of different problems that you can continue to repeatedly practice every day. And until you figure out, oh, now I understand the problem patterns. This is how I solve this type of problem when I encounter this. And if it's a live coding session where you were asked to build a model or A/B testing experiments, then making sure that you are familiar with the models that you commonly use to when it comes to regression or classification or anomaly detection, things like that, making sure that you know some of the common practices or techniques to work with the data. And a lot of times live coding is open book. So before I even get my hands on the keyboard to type in my solutions, I normally will walk through the interviewers. This is what I'm thinking about, how I'm going to write the solution to solve this problem. So to get their buy-in, and if any of the steps raise red flags, they will let you know, are you sure this is the way that you want to approach that? So, and during live coding, if you don't really know like what's the next step, what should I do, and it's like you can feel free to ask them questions. Of course, that if it's hackering style, that probably will indicate your level of seniority in coding as well. So, and the other one is problem solving. Is if you because it's open book, it's a great indication of your problem solving skills. You can Google all you can. So can you use Google to help solve your problems or the error that you have encountered? So that's also an indication of your problem solving skills. So using those resources to help prepare you for a great live coding experiences, and practice that with your friends or somebody who have gone through live coding process. And for statistics, there's a lot of books or website that talks about basics in statistics. And same goes to machine learning. And for system design, I know there's a really good book by I'm not gonna pronounce her name right. Chip Huyen is on ML system design. You can get the book and that walk through every single step in the post-deployment machine learning model lifecycle maintenance, and that will definitely help the candidates well prepared for the system design related interview questions.
And I know one of every role that you apply for will have an amazing headhunter that'll prepare you for every stage of the process, knows the hiring manager and what they're going to ask. What advice would you give candidates to try and find this information out on their own?
Great question. Definitely look on Glassdoor to see if anyone shared their interview experiences, or some people would also share the questions that they will ask. So that's definitely a great place to find information. Also on blind.com, a lot of website where people are sharing their interview experiences. And the other one is ask questions, ask your recruiter, or ask connections that you can find that also work in the company and work in a similar role that you're applying for. So I feel like asking questions can never be wrong. If you don't know, just ask questions, because all they can say is that I don't know, but I will find more information for you. So those would be the resources that I rely on or leverage to help me understand the interview process.
Absolutely. Great. And I did have a $1 million question for yourself. Now, throughout your career, I'm sure have you ever attended an interview that you didn't know the answer to the question that was asked? And a follow-up question to that is, how did you approach that situation?
Great question. I did had that when I was doing a hackering style like coding session where I was asked to probably build a solution for a traversal tree. And I was telling the interviewers that I am not very familiar because it's not my domain of expertise. And here's my first attempt of solving that solution. So I was walking him through my thought process. I said, this is not going to be the most optimized when it comes to time and complexity, but I will, if I have more time, this is how I would optimize it. So I would first walk him through the very dumb and naive approach of solving that problem, and then write it down if I can. So that was my approach in that situation. Is I don't really know. I could be wrong, but here's my thought process, and let me know if you think that's not going to work, and I will write down my codes to solve that solution.
No, I have come across this a few times, and I will just note, I'll just put this on this one. Someone did ask if you could share the name of the book for system design, if you could. You can message it to me and then I can put it out, would be great. Now, I've come across this in a few different instances. What I advise candidates to do is be quite upfront with the hiring managers and say that this is not, answer it to the best of your ability. Absolutely try. But, it is good to be honest and say, this is as much as I can recall about this particular subject or problem. And I tell them, I do a debrief after the interview. What did you think of the interview? Well, there was a question I really stumbled upon. In a lot of situations, after you stumble upon that question, you go about your day and life continues on. What I encourage candidates to do, especially if it's an opportunity they're really excited about, is their dream position, then I would say solve the problem, find the answer, go look online, as you said, and most importantly, try and find the appropriate solution to the answer. And I would even, and a lot of times with VCs, you get the hiring manager's emails. You can connect with them on LinkedIn, things like that. Hunt them down. Show the initiative. Show that you want to be there. Show that you're trainable, you're adaptable, and that if you join their organization, you're not going to be somebody that's going to want to be spooned. You're going to be somebody that's going to come to the table with an appropriate solution, and then from there you'll be able to give them a true feel of what you are doing, and most importantly, the type of person you are that they potentially could be joining their team. Now, what would you think of it? You came across a candidate that did that. If you had the exact scenario, you're interviewing them, they stumbled upon a question, and you wanted to and you received that response. What would you think to that?
That's a good question. And I think my honest opinion if I encounter someone like that is I think this person is humble, because it's not easy for someone to admit, yeah, I don't know. I don't know this question to as much depth as I could. And I would appreciate if that person follow up with more well thought through answer to that question. Is here's what I thought. And even sometimes candidates will give me some answers, or I have done it too. Is I give an answer, and then when I have more time to think, post the interview, and I said, oh, here's a better answer to that question. So I would also follow. I said, given more time thinking through the problem, here's what I think I could do better. And this are things that showcase your personality, and not that you being a humble person and then you have a growth mindset, which is super important throughout the career, because nobody will ever know everything as an expert to know everything. So I feel like it's okay to say, I don't know, but I will find out that information for you, give them more time, and I will follow up in an email.
I mean, I've seen it work 50-50. It's probably maybe a handful of times that it has worked and a handful of times that it hasn't. But I will tell you that that'll be an interview that you will not forget. You will absolutely remember, that problem, and it will be a problem that you will probably never get wrong again. And that is the moral of the
Absolutely.
story. A few
Yeah.
tips for on my end is that, as you alluded to, no, remember, no one expects you to know everything. As we've discussed, JDs and job descriptions, they want everything under the sun. So don't expect that you need to click every single bullet point that is on that job description. You need to focus on the ones that you absolutely do know, that you are able to explain and elaborate on, and have proof, either academically or professionally, that shows or highlights that you've been able to be successful in those particular topics or areas of expertise. And also, think before you answer. It's okay. There's no rush in an interview. If you are asked a question and you need to take some time to think, that is no problem. It's okay to say, give me a second. I just want to make sure I answer appropriately. No one is going to
Absolutely.
fault you. There's no speed. There's no speed in the interview. There's no extra points, for going through everything as fast as possible. So take your time, center yourself, and then from there, answer to the best of your abilities. Also, industries differ when it comes to understanding the differences and understanding what is expected of you. So do the research. Data scientists are amazing at that particular scope of work. Look at the analysis, do your own, research around the business, what they're looking for, or what their end goal is. Who are their clients? What are they looking to do? Or why does the company exist in the first place? Thinking as a business owner, as a key leader in that organization, even as a junior data scientist, will never, ever hurt you.
Mhm.
And that would be probably one of the best advice that I could ever, give a candidate that's interviewing, is try to put yourself in the business's shoes and see how you can add that value. Would you
Definitely.
like to add anything, Sheen?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point that you touched on, Donnie. I think similar to that is also sometimes in interviews, one of the things that's especially for software company, they're trying to build products, they're looking for is product sense. So giving that perspective of your user centric or product centric thinking, that also sets you apart, because ultimately you're building a solution trying to solve a pain point of your customers or for your users. So think from the perspective of your customers. So in consulting, there's a term called design thinking. So thinking from starting from the pain points and the business problem, and then go about your solution, that will be a better way to build a more user-centric product or user-centric feature and solution that will ultimately drive solution adoption, that will have more people use the solution and higher impacts across the industry or the company.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before we turn it over to the questions portion of today's session, I just wanted to highlight that everything, of course, is according to she and I's opinion, what we've seen throughout our careers and some of the best practices. So we just wanted to, highlight that, as well as who asked the question about the machine learning system design book. It is called Designing Machine Learning Systems, and that's the title of the book for your reference. Now, my favorite part of the show is the questions portion. I know we've been speaking a lot about interview processes from a hiring manager perspective, a candidate perspective. I would love to open the floor to some questions from the audience today. Let's see if we got anything coming through. I'll kick us off with one to start off with. I'm sure there's a few times in your career that you've had interviews that you feel didn't put your best foot forward. Are there, do you mind sharing a few instances, but a few maybe learning lessons that you've come up in your interviewing career that maybe could help, some junior data scientists that are trying to break into this industry, especially from a non-conventional, you don't have a degree in computer science or statistics or, any of the traditional disciplines that we see on job descriptions. What advice would you give someone that's trying to break into this field that would like to, become a data scientist one day?
Yeah, definitely. Great question. Thank you for that, Donnie. I think some of the common theme that I have came across with career changes into data science is that you don't how do I tell people that my skills that I have learned in my prior major or prior career can be transferable to data science. So I think this the key is really craft the story of your journey, what inspired you to wanting to get into data science, and how does it your prior experience can help you be different as a data scientist. So for me, for example, when I just got out of MSU as a faculty, I was looking for more of full grown data science experiences. So people will ask me, so why would why would we hire you? You didn't come from a computer science background. As it, I used to be a vet, and my patients were animals. They don't talk, so that cultivate my skills of having good observation and inquisition to ask questions that I don't really know, to don't not coming into the room with preconceived notion of certain problem. So that give me a different perspective when I came across a business problem that I'm trying to solve. I have a more different, more comprehensive perspective of or different angle to try to solve the problem. So trying to leverage your prior experiences or your domain. Some I have talked to people who study physics or geology. You must have some skill sets or different characteristics that is about you that make you stand out when you compare to the rest of the candidate pool.
Transferability, my favorite aspect of data science. It is just, I've seen hiring managers such as yourself that have, come from a variety of different backgrounds, some specifically that I can't even comprehend what they were studying at that time. But you've seen them grow to, leadership positions within data science. And it's all about, as you mentioned, storytelling ability, transferability. And sometimes you might think that a hiring manager is trying to put you off by asking that question, but they're really trying to give you some fuel to the fire and give you an opportunity to say why you think you should be a data scientist. Now we got a question, which is particularly maybe for myself or you, Shi. Now, how many interviews would you say lead to an offer? Now, I believe this depends on the size of the organization. Bigger organizations, I would say, especially in financial services, investment management firms, or big tech companies, I would say the process is average about 4 to 6 interviews. Now, this is mixed between stakeholders that you'll be working with on a day-to-day basis, technical teams, such as the engineering backend teams or the data engineering teams, as well as your eventual stakeholder. Now, I personally like startups and SMEs because it's typically much faster. They make decisions quicker, and most of the time they're a bit more agile. There's not layers and layers of individuals that have to sign off on particular opportunities, or excuse me, candidates, and signing off on the contracts, etc. I hope that answers your question, Mai. Now, I think the next one would be for you. She.
Is it books or some best practices? There is a book. I need to Google that book's name. If I'm not mistaken, I thought it's called Storytelling. You will think the book will be more creative with the name Storytelling with Data, a data visualization guide for business professionals. So that is a really good book. I always encourage my team members, more junior data scientists, to go over that. Some of the best practices I would highly recommend if you can find some white paper or decks that's coming from consulting firms. They have the best storytelling best practices, and that's where I learned a lot of my storytelling skills from, is doing consulting, because in consulting you work with a lot of different clients, different level, and not many of them probably are doing data science. So how do you craft your message and convert your insights from your analysis to a way that is actionable for the business? So think from their perspective, and when you're crafting that story and making sure that your deck, your presentation have a nice flow, just as if you're writing an essay or telling a story. So you give more context and then drive them in to this is what you need to do, and this is your key takeaway. Hope that's helpful for you.
Also, what I've been told is practice makes perfect. You know, taking your partner and bending their ear about how you're explaining. I think it's great to try and explain something technical and difficult to someone that has no idea what you're uh, essentially speaking about. It'll help you practice putting things into terms that everyone can understand, because in a lot of times you are the subject matter expert, you are the technical leader, and you're speaking to a business person that particularly doesn't understand the different types of statistical models, the different testing, the machine learning aspect of what you are doing. They just want to know ultimately what it is you did, how you found it, and how is it going to benefit that team or the business. And if you focus on those three, I would say particular areas, in most cases, it'll be able to be portrayed what you're trying to say. But practice absolutely makes perfect. Now, the next one is definitely for you, Shi.
How to build a GitHub profile to showcase when my work is proprietary. Yep, that's very common. And there are two ways you can go about this. If you have time, if time allows, build a couple of pet projects where you feel really passionate about that can also showcase your skill sets. That will be one way to create your GitHub profile, and also collaborates in some open source projects. If you I have built a couple of my own open source library, which I always send to people that I care about. So this is the open source library that I built. Check it out. And or this through in your interview process, you can tell the interviewers that I am not allowed to disclose a lot of details in the project, but here's what I can tell you. So like talk about the models that you use, your general approach to doing feature engineering and selecting the metrics, because models, unless it's proprietary, built from scratch, a lot of them, they're open source. So you can talk about those non-proprietary parts that can also help you showcase your skill sets that way.
Great. And then the next one I believe is definitely for myself. Now, I would say that on average, if you have 3 to 4 companies in process at one time, one of those will lead to an offer as a law of ratios. Now, I know I've been speaking to several candidates recently that have been putting out hundreds of CVs. And I would say that coming up with something that is a bit more customizable for the particular role and what they're trying to ask you to do from a day to day will lead to you getting a much higher chance of being shortlisted. The particular candidate I actually spoke with today, and the first question that popped in my mind is, how much research did you do with each one of these, companies that you're, applying to? It's so easy now on LinkedIn to just click boom, 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 and just keep on going. You could, spend hours just clicking that same button because all your details are saved. I would be more tactful and strategic in what you are looking at and what you're trying to do. Particular industries that excite you, maybe let's say for green tech. She, a little bit about that. If that's something you're passionate about, researching companies that are in that particular domain and highlighting your passions for that space, side projects that you've done that you're quite passionate about, I think that would lead to a much more likelihood that you would be shortlisted. I'm hearing too often, candidates are applying to so many different roles and not hearing anything back. The best advice I can give is have a bit more of a tailored and structured approach. And of course, hopefully partnering with, someone either inside the organization or an external partner like myself that is able to navigate those hoops and give you that advice to, set you up for the most amount of success. I hope that answers your question.
That's
Any
real
other
well said,
questions?
Donnie.
Yeah, trying. Teamwork, Chi. Anything else from anyone today?
Yeah, I would like to tie back while we're waiting for more questions. Is that show passion? I think that's really important because I did have some interviews where the candidates, I don't really sense the passion from them, and I wasn't sure if they are truly enjoying the conversation with me. So definitely, if that's a position that you really feel passionate about, show your passion, making sure that they can feel your enthusiasm.
Absolutely. You want to be memorable. In today's climate, Companies are, they feel that they have the pick of the litter, shall we call it. So many candidates, hear every day that companies are being laid off. There's so many individuals that are looking for work. So a company might be speaking to 15 to 20 different, candidates at one time. So you want to make yourself memorable. And it's easy to talk about something you're passionate about. It kind of just naturally comes out. One way that's good to highlight that is side projects. Something you do on the side that it shows that you continue learning, that data science isn't just a 9 to 5 job or a 9 to 6 job. It is something that you love doing. And as they say, if you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. You want to come across memorable. And a lot of times the way you're able to do that is personal projects. Because typically they're absolutely custom tailored to you. It's nothing to do with the business. It's just your own individual interest. So I would think about highlighting those kinds of projects in an interview process as well. And then I think the next one's for you, from Celine.
Yeah, definitely. Projects or profiles. I probably need to get back to you on the profiles. For projects, I think really pick the things that you're really passionate about. For example, you're very passionate about doing image classification. Find data sets on Kaggle. There's a lot of interesting data sets that you could use on there. And a lot of government, they have open data. There's a lot of open data sources as well. So you can find data from those different data sources to build your own, create your own questions too, or make your own hypothesis and go about solving those. I think those are the ways I would recommend going about creating your own GitHub projects, because when you do have passion, like Donnie said, you do show that in when you're walking people through the projects, what you have done, and even talk about why you chosen that projects as your pet projects, that also showcase a different way to showcase you as a candidate.
Absolutely. Very good suggestion. Any other questions from the participants today? Well, some last little thoughts before we end today's session. Now, keep in mind that everything is customizable depending on who you're speaking to, depending on the specific job, the company. There is a good amount of information that should be prepared before this session actually happens. Now, researching company, researching the interviewer, of course, taking a look at Glassdoor, other online media that can give you insights into the questions they ask, the type of interview process, if you don't already have that information. And most importantly, be remembered. That is really what we would like, the hiring manager. Remember, the hiring manager shortlisted you because they saw some interest in your profile and what your background is. You already have the best foot in the door that you could possibly have. It is just to make sure that you solidify that that portion of what they thought initially of what your profile stuck out to them. Ooh, that's a good one. You want to try that one, She?
Yeah, definitely. I think on top of being humble, said honestly, I don't have lots of experiences. Here's what I know. The other one is trying to see the how you can spin that to a more positive light to yourself. So some of the things that I sometimes would do in throughout my career is I don't really have a lot of experience in this topic. However, I am a fast learner. I believe my skills will allow me to quickly adapt to the scenario to understand more about the problems that we're trying to solve and quickly pick up the skills needed to resolve the problem or solve the problem and create values. So those are the ways that I normally leverage to handle questions where I don't really know a lot about in about particular area.
And what about the follow-up to that? I think that might be more for you,
Such
Shi.
as rolling things out in production, best practice. That's really a good question. Let me think. So I think if you know that this is an area that you don't have a lot of experiences in, try to read more. There's a lot of seminars where people will share about how they go about productionizing a solution from development to productionization. So listen to those seminars about how different companies do that, what kind of infrastructure do they use, and in your day-to-day work, try to incorporate some of the best SWE practices. Like for example, in data science, when I'm leading the team, I always said we wanted to follow software engineering principles when I'm writing my code. So I'm making sure that I have high quality code. So knowing that those are the areas that you don't have a lot of practical experience in, trying to get as much knowledge about those areas as possible when you're going into the interview, that will also show that you have the initiative to understand areas that you don't have practical experiences in, but at least you put the initiative forward. So I have taken the steps to get more knowledge in those areas. Here's what I have done, and this is what I know.
I would also just add to the fact that I'm sure there is a project that you've done previously that could have added some value to the business. Necessarily, it might have been the budget constraints, the timing wasn't right. There was just so many layers on top of you before, you could get an approval to get something ultimately rolled out. I would leverage off of the project that you feel was going to add the most benefit to the business. I would not mention, that it rolled into production. I would go into the analysis, how you spoke to the stakeholders, you understood the core of the problem. You went back, did your analysis, or worked with a team and was able to find some particular solutions that you wanted to present. And even just presenting a solution to key stakeholders within the business is valuable, very valuable. There's two buckets that I would say traditionally people try to get put into when it comes to data science. It is either like the consulting side, where it's just completely, business facing. You're really just liaising between, those particular key stakeholders and the more technical teams, or someone that wants to do a bit of it all. They enjoy the technical side, they enjoy the business, adding the value, and really like seeing their project from end to end, from whiteboarding session all the way to deployment. And there's only one, I guess, party that can really make it into deployment, and those are the business and the people that actually accept it and give the green light. So don't count out the experiences where you've been able to do up until the stage as far as you're able to go, to highlight that, because that'll hold some weight and that'll hold some value.
That's a very good point, Donnie. I appreciate that business in value and impact perspective.
There's benefits in speaking to hiring managers like yourself every day. I am listening. Any other questions? Thank you for everyone who's asked a question, by the way. They're very good. I really appreciate it. I'm sure there'll be some people that'll get some benefit out of it. Well, if that is all the questions we have today, I want to thank She for her participation and her time today to share some of her subject matter expertise. And thank you everyone for attending. I know a lot of you are looking for opportunities and roles in the market right now. Please, if you are not already connected with myself, do connect with me, because I will be posting opportunities as they come for my portfolio. And most importantly, we are rooting for you to find the next home that you are looking for, or break into that data science domain that you are enjoying so much. And we really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.